Dispatches from the Frontline episode 4. This is actually a continuation from episode 2. We took a slight detour with episode 3 to do with the Star Academies. I hope you found value in that. By the way, I suffered a lot of horrendous abuse from people who clearly thought they'd get that sneak. So I presume they thought they would sneak that in through the back door without anyone knowing. Well, now you all know. And what you do is entirely up to you. At the very least, I expect the land not to be handed over to a private business specialising in Muslim schools. That's at the very least is what I expect. And objections from the opposition councillors, whether they have the bottle to do that or not, is something we will wait and see. Okay, these dispatches go out first of all live via YouTube. I kind of record them live, so people who follow me on YouTube with a 99p a week, a month, 99p a month subscription, I don't get anywhere near that. I think by the time Apple and YouTube or Google and YouTube have took their share, I end up with 33p or something like that. So those people get to engage with it live. I then go away and edit it and share it with everyone who subscribes. It's free or paid at the moment. Everyone who subscribes to Red Wall and the Rabble, they get an email with that. There is a plan for a live Q&A later in the week and a WhatsApp group, but all of that is work in progress as I get my head around this new format. Now, to bring you up to speed, in episode 2 of Dispatches of the Frontline, what we saw, what I shared with you, was that all was not as it seemed with the CSE motion that Oldham Council finally passed. It was an administration motion, which meant it was a Labour Party motion, but actually it was presented by Brian Hobin and by Mark Hince. AROOJ SHAH, the leader of the Labour Party, did not speak at all. Mushtaq, when he did speak, stood up to speak in the main about some Ofsted inspection. And they focused on how they needed to vote for it because survivors had helped put this together. It's a complete fallacy, isn't it? Because survivors had been screaming in the public gallery the previous 7 times. They voted it down. And what I should have, hopefully, did expose was that this motion falls short in a number of elements, but primarily it fell short on holding to account those who were responsible for the cover-up, those who failed the children. The request for a public inquiry omits that and wants to focus on the survivors' stories and the survivors' testimonies. The public inquiry won't happen, by the way. This Labour administration won't support a public inquiry, and which is why they also within the motion said, and if we don't get one, which we expect not to get one, we want an independent inquiry. But already, as Councillor Helen Bishop of all of them clearly highlighted concerns that the council were already trying to set the remit of what an independent investigation would look like. They kept referring to something called a Telford style investigation, but what they are talking about actually is as far removed from a Telford style investigation as possibly could be. And speaking of the Telford style investigation, it's now been I think a year or 2 years since the Telford style investigation made its recommendation, and it's stalled. It's got absolutely nowhere. It's got nowhere because there's no impetus, there's no people there who will help push it over the line, and the system wins in the end because people give up. People just get tired and give up, and that's why the Telford style investigation in the end has failed to hold a single person accountable. So where it ended was Hobin being very clear and Hince being very clear that there's no need to come back. There's no need for the letter of whatever it is the chief executive's writing. No need for that to be shared with even the leaders of the other opposition parties. The chief executive will write to the government, the Home Secretary, asking for a public inquiry, and if they don't get one, they'll launch an independent investigation of where they're already trying to set the terms of reference. And the public inquiry that they're asking for completely omits holding to account those who failed children, whether they were in the council, whether they were in the police, whether they were in social services, wherever. And Hobin and Hince have gone along with that. In fact, they've helped to dream it up. And now they are both been handsomely rewarded. The Conservatives and the Lib Dems did attempt to amend that motion. You've seen in the past the Labour Party amend opposition motions on CSE and completely destroy the wording. They did attempt to amend the motion, not to destroy it, but to strengthen it. The Mayor, Dr. Chauhan, whose meeting these full council meetings are, refused the amendment. You'll have to ask him why he refused the amendment. I don't know why he refused the amendment. I think it's very clear to me that he is not conducting these meetings. He was better at them than the others before him, but the bar was so low that, you expect someone to be better than what the predecessors like Jenny Harrison managed in terms of chairing meetings. But Dr. Chauhan is not, in my opinion, playing this fairly. So he refused the Conservatives' amendment. Again, that's completely unconstitutional. But the Conservatives are powerless because they've got no way in which to have their voices amplified at the moment. And they're all over the place themselves because of the national picture. The Lib Dems have got themselves in trouble after recording that secret meeting. And it's a good job they recorded it, I think, It's right that they recorded it and shared it. Otherwise, you would never have known about the secret negotiations between Mark Hince, Lisa Navesey, and the way in which the chief executive was politically conducting himself, in my opinion. Something he shouldn't have been doing. So they weren't allowed to amend, but they did put their own motion in. So the Conservatives and the Lib Dems put in it was a Conservative motion, but it was seconded by Sam AL-HAMDANI. And the motion was if you look at it and you think, okay, the first motion passed with everyone agreeing to it. This motion actually should have passed as well. Two fundamental differences in this motion to that of AROOJ, to that of Hobin's and Hince's. One was the inclusion of the letter to the government that public inquiry needs to look at those who were involved in failing those children, including those involved in the cover-up. Understandable? Yeah. Nothing unreasonable. And the second element was that they were very specific in the use of the language, which is to make reference to if the government says no to a public inquiry, then we want a non-statutory inquiry. A non-statutory inquiry is just a legal terminology of what the Telford investigation was. So if you don't get the government to say, yes, we want an inquiry like they had in Telford. Hobin and Hince referenced Telford, but they didn't mean Telford. So that was the difference. That was the main difference. And I'll just bring it up here so you see it. So the main difference was simply this. One, that the public inquiry include investigating those that failed the victims. Specifically, police officers, council staff, other agencies, statutory agencies. And secondly, that if the government say no to a public inquiry, then the council commission inverted commas, a non-statutory investigation inquiry. Straightforward, very simple. It should not have caused any confusion because all these guys were attempting to do was strengthen the original motion. So there are no loopholes, there's no wiggle room. Because any investigation will take 2 years, 3 years to conduct if we don't get the public inquiry. Non-statutory investigation, Telford style, with exactly the same steps to ensure impartiality, independence. And in a letter to the government, simply add, we want the people who failed these kids to be also investigated. No big deal. Or so you would think.
You have 7 minutes because your working partners have taken 30 seconds, so Councillor Quigg. So Councillor Quigg to move and Councillor AL-HAMDANI to second the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I rise in support of, obviously, to move the motion as presented. I think, obviously, we've discussed this in slightly, I could say, in the administration/non-administration motion one. But what I will say, and in order to try and keep things as concise as possible, is that it goes back to 2019, as far as I'm aware, of this becoming a issue of which politicians in this chamber actually discussed Councillor Hoban. And let me be clear, it was my former group leader and former councillor, Councillor Hudson, and I think Councillor Sykes, who wrote to the chief executive at the time in order to bring this up as an issue. In fact, Councillor Hoban, it was Councillor Hudson who seconded the motion, the very first motion that you put down on this subject. So there was already at the very beginning cross-party support in the opposition anyway to try and get something done in 2019, 2020. But unfortunately, it's taken until now.
So in 2019, the Lib Dem leader, Howard Sykes, and the Conservative leader, Councillor Hudson, wrote to the Chief Executive, Caroline Wilkins, concerned. They wrote to the Chief Executive concerned as a consequence of a dossier I released in a Medium article called Welcome to Oldham Part 3. Sean Fielding was leader of the council. So that's what's happened. That's what he's making reference to. So this goes back to 2019 when these councillors, council leaders, both raised it.
Nearly 7-8 goals to go to get to the stage where we're at. Now, obviously, our motion includes, unlike the motion that's passed, about Greater Manchester Police's role in this, other outside agencies, and all those groups that may have known about it but done nothing about it. Because everyone is equally culpable as corporate parents to what went on. And to Councillor Mushtaq, sorry, children were left to rot. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the problem. If the issue wasn't there, if they weren't left to rot, then we would have had this issue sorted. But they have been. People were left and were ignored on this issue. So we need to make sure that when it's robust, that when we investigate, it's robust across interagencies. Because it's sometimes a little bit too easy to allow some of the agencies to get away with not saying anything at all or refusing to give evidence. And I think that is where, if the Home Secretary does allow it, the new Home Secretary, I think it's Secretary Balls or Cooper, whatever she may call herself, is going to allow this to happen. If it doesn't, then obviously it comes back to having a non-statutory inquiry, which will then be led here. But we have to get those details right with the right experts involved.
So there you have Councillor Lewis Quigg clearly articulating that we've got to get this right. We spent 5 years, 8 attempts. We've now, across the council on page, that this issue isn't going to go away and something needs to be done about it, and we need to write to the government for a public inquiry. And if the government doesn't give us a public inquiry, then any independent inquiry we commission as a council has got to be robust and fit for purpose, transparent, independent, above, it'll hold up to scrutiny. That's what is passionately playing for. And that's what their motion is. Watch it play out.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.